Welcome to the Childcare Genius podcast, proud to be the world's #1 community for brilliant childcare leaders. Each episode will feature interviews with the brightest minds in the childcare industry to guide you into becoming a smarter business leader. Our hosts have opened 10 schools while raising 5 children. They are certified business coaches and are the top-selling childcare business book authors of all time. This episode is sponsored by Elif Childcare Insurance. Give Blake a call at 972-232-2258 to get a free quote on childcare business insurance today. Let's welcome to the Childcare Genius podcast our hosts, Brian and Carol Dupre.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Childcare Genius podcast.
We're your hosts, Brian and Carol Dupre. And we want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. We've got a great one lined up. Actually, it's very exciting. And you know what? I say that every week, don't I? I mean, when is it not exciting? Get to hang out with Brian and Carol for the next 25 minutes. More so Carol than me, I'm sure, because everybody always tells me how they like her more than me. But that's okay. I don't take it personal. But anyway, we're interviewing today one of our Childcare Genius professors. She's an adjunct professor. Her name is Prerna Richards, and she has a company called Together We Grow. And she helps childcare owners, teachers, and directors with child behavior issues. We had Prerna on the podcast a few months ago, and it was the #1 most downloaded podcast we've ever had. So we wanted to bring her back, refresh the episode a little bit, talk a little bit more about behavior issues, because it's one of the #1 things teachers are struggling with is behavior issues in the classrooms. And we know your teachers are stressed, the owners are stressed, and we wanted to bring you help. And this episode is going to be amazing. Did you enjoy doing it?
Yes.
She definitely brings it. She gave us some great tips, and I think you're gonna enjoy hearing from Prerna.
Yes, let's get Prerna on the line. Hello, Prerna. Welcome to the Childcare Genius podcast. How are you today?
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation. How are you guys doing?
Good to see you again. I'm so excited to have you back on the Childcare Genius podcast. You were actually our #1 most downloaded episode. We had you on several months ago, and I wanted to bring you back for a follow-up interview and expand on what we talked about before. So we're excited to have you back.
Thank you.
So where are you located at?
Dallas, Texas, just north of Dallas.
Texas. Wow. And I assume we were down in Texas a few months ago, and they said it gets hot down there. So how hot is it down there today?
So it gets really, really hot. July, August, and September, we live in the hundreds. But today is gorgeous. 85, sunny, blue sky. Is beautiful.
Wow, 85. We're in Maine, and we're at 92 today, which is unusual for us. So it's weird that we're actually warmer than you.
I know.
It doesn't happen very often, but we're not complaining because we only get to 90 usually 5 or 6 days a year, and we're already at 90
really?
twice.
I didn't realize that 90s only happens a few times a year. I didn't realize
that's 80s are our norm, low 80s even. 70s are our average, 75 to 80. We have the perfect summer.
Oh, wow. Yes, we've been to Maine a long time ago. My husband and I did. We loved it. It was so pretty. It was so pretty. We went for hikes. We went on the boat. It was gorgeous.
It is. And no humidity. So that's why we really like it in the summer.
Yeah. So good.
Well, good. Well, let's get into it now. So we are excited to have you. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you do with your company. And you deal a lot with child behavior issues. So right now, there's a lot of center owners struggling out there with behavior issues. I mean, probably you're seeing it all the time, but I've seen it that the last few years it's probably gotten worse and worse.
Definitely since COVID.
Yeah, I think since COVID, it's gotten worse. So it's probably the #1 source of teacher frustration and turnover. And can you give our audience maybe 3 to 5 techniques to help teachers deal with this problem behavior?
Sure. And so let me start off by telling you said, what does my company do? Let me start there. So Together We Grow is the name of my company. It is 5 years old now. And I provide 3 services, and I'm staying in my lane. That's all I want to do. The first one is teacher training. professional development, which is brain-based, and social emotional brain research, and all about the brain, social emotional. That's my jam. That's where I want to stay. But also for the teachers and the teams, the leading from emotional intelligence, creating teams that work. So all to do with relationships and humans and brains is my track for professional development. And the second thing, which actually aligns with what your question was, that we're seeing increased behaviors, I'm a behavior coach. So I work with schools in person, or I work with them online. And you are right, it's not an imagination that we are seeing an increase in behaviors and stress. So, yes, the pandemic has made it worse, but I think it was on a ramp before the pandemic. And I think the pandemic just pushed it off the ballpark with the levels of stress and reactions. So that's the space that I do. And the third service that I provide is those programs that want to go for NAEYC accreditation. I'm a consultant for that. And I break down the pieces and make it doable and manageable. So a lot of my work is done with the behavior coaching. And what I've realized is that brain, behaviors, and learning are connected. These three words go together. If the brain is not engaged, the behaviors happen and no learning can happen. Absolutely not. It just doesn't exist. And also for the grown-ups, they can't do their best work if you're under stress.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of owners under stress in the last couple of years, I tell you that.
Yeah, stress and mental well-being is also hand in hand. When we have mental well-being neglected, then our stress goes up and the cycle perpetuates, right? So you wanted to talk about strategies what teachers can do in a classroom. But maybe it's helpful to understand the word challenging behaviors. Let's start the conversation there. I personally don't like this word at all, because the grown-up is getting challenged is why we call it challenging behaviors. It's not really a challenge. It's because the grown-up doesn't know what to do with it, and the grown-up is getting challenged. And then we start using this word very freely. Oh, the challenging behaviors. But what I'm realizing is that different grown-ups get challenged by different behaviors. And it's a thing with the grown-up. So the first strategy that I think is very, very helpful, if you have young children at home, I have 4 grandchildren at home, and I've raised my daughters. So, right, there's children at home, not just in the programs. And so the first step is to recognize your triggers. Because you're getting triggered by it and you're becoming challenged by it, your approach is different to a child. So recognizing that this behavior triggers me. Quite often, when a child is not listening, is a trigger for the grown-up. Quite often, if the child is being rude, is a trigger for the grown-up, right? And when the grown-up is triggered, you're not being effective. So the first strategy is really recognize your triggers and have a plan. So for example, I had a teacher that the other day said to me, this child is driving me crazy, refuses to listen, just being obstinate, defiant, controlling. Like, she used all these words, like, this 4-year-old was controlling this person's life and she just couldn't take it anymore. And so I asked her to make a list of her triggers. And the next time we met for coaching, I said, what did you discover about yourself? And she said, I was getting triggered because this child was not listening. I said, okay, the behavior is not going to change. The child is not going to change the behavior. What can change is how you show up for it. And so I said, what did you do? And she says, because I knew that this child was getting under my skin, I had to have a plan, and I decided that I would make eye contact when I talked to this child. I would force myself to get down on the eye level and make eye contact. And the second thing that she did, she discovered for herself, was she was given instruction to the child, and she started asking the child to tell her back, what did you hear me say? And I said, how did it work out? And she says, I did not get triggered. Our relationship changed, right? So when we are talking about children's challenging behaviors, we have to recognize that it starts with us getting triggered. And that's the first strategy if you want to change anything. I have come up with an acronym, DSD, do something different. If what you're doing is not working and your classroom is a hot mess and it's chaotic and you're stressed and the kids are stressed and there's loud voices and there's a lot going on, you have to do something different. So step number 1, know your triggers. Step number 2, become a breathing program. And maybe we talked about this the last time, but I want to stress this again, because breathing is a simple strategy that changes how you show up in the world. It helps you to deal with stress. But more importantly, teach your children to take deep breaths. I've been in classrooms where they say, let's take a deep breath. Nobody's taking the deep breath except for the grown-ups, and the children are still dysregulated. So there are no bad kids, they're dysregulated brains. And we really have to understand that that behavior is a form of communication, is telling me something. Behavior has meaning, behavior has communication. So strategy number 2 is the breathing. So know your triggers, do the breathing. And the number 3 is start really labeling the feelings and the emotions behind the behavior. It is a game changer when children feel heard and understood. I'll give you an example. This circle time was happening just last week, and the kids were just getting up and walking off the carpet. They were just leaving, and she kept calling them one by one, and she was getting all stressed out. And then she would tell the team teacher, go get them. They have to sit down. They have to listen. They need to learn to listen. They're in school. They need to listen. The whole thing, whole attention was labeling the behavior that was wrong instead of listening, right? So listening sounds different from labeling. Instead of saying, what's going on? You keep getting up. What's the problem? Why are you yelling? What is happening? Right? I didn't hear any questions being asked of the kids. All I heard was label the behavior that's wrong for them to correct. So this is strategy number 3. But the 4th one is start connecting before correcting. I've come up with 3 C's, which are game changer. Connect before you correct, connect before compliance, and connect before curriculum. Children cannot learn when they're stressed out. Children cannot learn when their behaviors are happening. Children cannot process information if all they hear all day is, don't do this, sit down, don't move, be quiet, stop it, right? It's a recipe for disaster. And quite frankly, we're asking our children to do things that we don't ask grown-ups to do. We're asking them to sit for long periods of time. We're asking them to not move for long periods of time. We're asking them to not respond and be quiet and obedient all day. This little girl was refusing to write the tracing of the letters, and this teacher was getting so stressed by it, and she was so reactive. Pick it up, just pick it up. And this girl is not picking it up, and she's like holding her hand, pick it up. And the girl starts pushing the table, and she takes the Legos and she does this, and she starts screaming and she starts crying, and all of this is happening. But the teacher wants compliance. The teacher wants obedience. And I was just sitting there thinking, how did we get here? This is so sad. This is not what childhood should be. This is not what early childhood programs should be. How did we get here that we're forcing her to trace a letter? And what does it even matter at the end of the day? Is she learning it? She's so stressed out. Nobody can learn when they're that stressed out. And then the teacher said to me, do you see this? Do you see this? This is why I need you. I'm like, you need to take a deep breath. Like, you're stressing everybody out, right? So children are acting out. So those are the main strategies. Connect before correct. Get to know your triggers. Take deep breaths. It'll help with self-regulation. Self-regulation is a skill that children haven't learned yet. We haven't mastered them yet. And teach them to know their triggers, right? Having conversations, reflective conversations is what I like to call them. After the episode, after the tantrum, circle back with that child and ask them these questions. What happened? How were you feeling? And what can you do the next time? Right? But we're not doing that part. The teachable moment is not happening. We're just wanting to correct when the behavior is happening. That doesn't do any good. The child doesn't learn. The behavior continues. And we just end up labeling the kids.
Wow, very interesting.
Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, but that was a good
Perfect.
answer. You had a lot of different topics in
Yeah.
there. And have you seen a big turnaround in the people that you work with, the mindsets of their teachers change?
100%. 100%. Every school that I have worked with has seen the stress come down and the joy go up. Did you know that joy is the emotion of learning? Like, we learn when we are feeling joyful. Like, it's a game changer. If you can bring joy into your classroom, you will learn and the children will learn, and there would be absolutely harmony between the grown-ups and the teachers. So yes, the strategies are effective because you change your mindset and you go from inside outside. So labeling doesn't work, but listening works. Correcting doesn't work, but connecting works. Right? Children want to be seen and heard and understood. When they don't feel seen and heard and understood, they act out. They're not able to tell you, I'm having a bad day. Their behavior tells us, I am having a rough day.
So how should we address the children's behavior with the parents, and when should we get them involved?
Such a good question. Such a good question. So I have two parts to this. One, not all parents have the bandwidth to take on more stress from the school. They're not capable of having the teacher tell you every single day that Henry acted out today, Henry hit today, Henry kicked today, Henry bit today. And what I'm realizing is that sometimes we expect a lot more from our parents and we don't give them grace. So my advice is, if the parent is willing and is able to help you, partner with you, then by all means it's going to be more effective. But sometimes with some families, you have to recognize that this family is not able to partner with me. They are not capable of partnering. They're living in their own survival brain. They are overwhelmed and they're barely surviving. They have no more to give. And so we have to meet them where they're at, right? And so then recognizing that all I can do is, when you're with me in my program, I can do things differently to manage the stress when you're with me. I have zero control when I send you home. And maybe the cycle happens again at home, and you get trauma at home, and you get abuse and neglect at home. And because your parents are stressed out, you absorb the stress. I think there's wisdom in recognizing, can this family work with us or can they not? So that's part one. Part two is, if the behavior is harming other children, like you are actually harming other children, then we have to address it, because it's a safety concern. It's not just compliance concern that this child is rude to me and this child doesn't listen to me, versus this child is beating up somebody and doing a chokehold to somebody and biting something. Like, safety comes first, right? Our first most job is to keep children safe when they're in our programs. So if it's a safety issue, I would have conversations with the parents. I would document it. I would have it listed that, this is our policy. Look at your policy, your challenging behavior policy. What is the escalation process? But what quite often happens is we have a policy that we don't implement. So we don't follow the steps. We're not documenting it properly. We're not keeping the parents in touch properly. So if you have a policy, is it being implemented, or is your staff abusing it? Is it being used for every little nitpicking thing, or is it used for big safety concerns, right? So parents also get tired with every minute. Every time I come to pick up my child, you're telling me what a horrible day they had, and I'm sick and tired of you telling me that. I have nowhere to leave them. I'm doing this because your location, your price, convenience, and I need to get to work, right? I'm doing the best I know how. So recognizing that there's a role that parents can play in partnering. There's a role that teachers have to take ownership, but there's also a role that the administrators play in accountability and holding staff and following through. And so to answer your question, when should we involve the families? It's very important to involve the families if there's safety concerns happening and trying to understand their perspective. Is there something happening at home? Are you going through a divorce? Are you going through separation? Is the child going between two families? Because all of that will add to the behaviors. All of that will add. And so many of our children are living in split homes. And the rules in this home is different from this home. And then based on who drops us off at school, we act out, right? There's a lot that goes on. So it can be a blame game. It can be a you do it or we're kicking you out. But also you have to train your staff on brain development. You also have to provide the right resources for your staff, because our staff are not trained to deal with trauma, abuse, neglect, stress. And then they are bringing their own stress brain into the program, right? So there's double whammy. The grown-up has a trauma brain, the child is coming from a trauma brain, and now we're clashing.
And we've seen that a lot with staff too, with the trauma brain and dealing with the kid brain and yeah, it's definitely, I can see how it clashes in, but there's got to be a point where um there the termination discussion comes up
100%.
where, and you'd mentioned a little bit about safety. Is there any other areas besides safety that a termination would be acceptable?
Well, I mean, the first thing is safety to me. If you're harming other children, if you're harming property, if you're harming grown-ups, then you need more help than your staff is trained for. Not every school is designed for every child. I would also say some children get traumatized at school because the grown-up doesn't know what to do with them. So it perpetuates. And then maybe, another school, another grown-up is a better combination and a better match for that person. But after documenting and trying and working with the child to really understand, I am hesitating with this disenrolling, because every time I know when an owner and director has to disenroll a family, they sit in a very struggling space. I've seen so many directors have these, because that's when I get in there, right? That's when I'm talking to them, because they've reached this limit, they don't know what to do. And I know that it's not an easy decision to make. So have we tried to understand what the child's triggers are? Have we tried to see the grown-ups' triggers? Have we tried to change how we're talking? Have we done all these things and it's still not helping? Then you're not the right fit, right? You're not doing that child any service. If you're actually stressing them more and traumatizing them more, it's not a good fit. Then you should part ways. It's turning into an abusive situation at the school when school should be a safe space, and it's not. Then it's not a good fit.
Now, what we have found out over the years is certain teachers tend to be ones that they become magnets for the problem children. And I'm starting to see why, because of what you're saying here. It's how they're approaching the situation. And they probably have some teachers that never have any problems with the children. So you can't always say statistically you would probably get an average, but so you're thinking the teacher's reactions are probably the biggest driver.
100%, 100%. Relationship. The children who act out the most, the children who are absolutely disruptive to a program, are screaming out for help. They're screaming out for love and understanding, and they're not getting it. And their language happens to be relationship. That's their currency. And when they don't get that currency, they act out even more. And so, I cannot have this conversation with a very hard and fast rule and say, point B, when you reach 10 strikes, you're out, because it's individual brains, it's individual connections, it's individual relationships, and relationships will trump any behaviors, because when children feel safe, loved, and accepted and understood, their behavior does change. And this is why we have some magical teachers and some teachers who should not be in the field. And there's no shame in me saying that. Like, if this is not your space, go do something else. Don't mess with brains, because you're brain architects. The work you do matters. The work you do is important. So raising young children, 90% of the brain is getting wired, birth to 5. The work we do matters, but the behaviors are getting in the way, and learning is not happening, and the stresses are so high.
Wow.
Could you tell us a little more about Together We Grow and how you can help owners and directors?
Thank you for asking. So Together We Grow is just now launching a membership program, because I've been doing it, going to individual schools and online, and I just can't do the bandwidth. I can't just spread it. The need is greater than I can do one person. So now I'm launching a membership, and the membership is for a school, and the school gets the benefit for the entire team. So there's different levels. At level 3, you get weekly coaching. With level 3 comes actually 6 coaching opportunities a month, and you get new training. So it's training/coaching. Just training alone will only transfer information to 20% implementation. With coaching, it jumps to 80%. So, and then it's individualized. So the groups are there. And then the level 2 gives you 2 coaching sessions a month, and level 3 only gives you recorded sessions. But think of it like this. Think of it as having a consultant without paying a salary of a consultant. because every time you lose a teacher, you're losing money. Every time you have to do a new hire, you're losing money. Staff turnover, staff burnout is directly linked to your bottom line.
What about children turnover? That costs money
Yeah.
too.
That 100%, right? If the families are not happy, who's spreading the message about your program and you're everywhere that they can? This, don't go to this school. This is awful. This is, you lose money.
And we found out, problem children don't just leave. They usually have 2 or 3 families that leave because of the problem child. So
Right.
dealing with an issue can keep a whole lot of revenue in. So this is a very cost-effective approach to get your teachers, first of all, happier.
Yeah.
If the teachers are happier, they're going to come in and they're going to stay longer as well. So staff turnover, kid turnover, and just overall happiness, and owner happiness, because staff happiness and parent happiness. I mean, it's just everybody's a win-win.
Yeah, and challenging behavior is not just a problem for that teacher. The challenging behavior is a problem for that entire program. And if you don't do something different, you're not going to turn it around. It's not just going to outgrow. It's only going to get worse because it doesn't go away. And I'm sure you have some stats of what it costs when you lose a teacher or hire a new teacher. I'm sure you have some stats for that. How many dollars you waste?
Yeah, it's about $3,000 for an experienced teacher to replace them. And you're probably losing a couple a year, and this may be a big reason why you're losing them. So do you have
that adds up, right? 3 times 4 is 12, like $12,000 gone in a day.
Gone just like that, yeah.
Just like that.
And that's just staff. That doesn't count kids.
Yeah, so that's one thing, the way I support. But if you don't want to join the membership, no worries. I also have a newsletter every week going out, and I have a YouTube channel with 5-minute videos on brain. I have a website, togetherwegrow.online. All the resources are free. There's resources to download for free. There's YouTube for free. There's newsletter for free. So, do what you can, join the journey where you can, and take advantage of it, because you're not alone, and it's not just happening to you. It's happening to more and more of our programs, but we really, really have an opportunity to change the next generation, guys. Like, this is serious work. We can change it. We can change it.
You can. And this is one of the reasons why we brought you on our team. You're an adjunct professor now at Child Care Genius University. So
thank you.
You work, and we're glad to have you, because our coaching program, we have you train and work with our students to help them on these issues. And we know how important this is. So that's why we brought you on the team. And we love having you. And you are our behavior specialist coach. And
I love it. I love it. I'm happy to help and support.
And we want to thank you for everything you've done. This is a great interview. We'll put your contact information in our show notes. So reach out, togetherwegrow.com. Is that correct?
Online. 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 I know it's unusual.
Yep, that's fine. We will put that in the show notes. You just click on that and directly, and you will put your email as well. And anybody that needs help with behavior issues, which is probably everybody listening to this podcast, probably needs to reach out. And I highly recommend this membership as a way to get your program online and get your teachers on board and make everybody happy. And if you do get something out of this podcast with some tips here, shoot us an email, let us know. We love to hear feedback from our podcast guests. And Prerna, like I said, you were the #1 most downloaded episode of the last 6 months, and we wanted to bring you on because I know we wanted to give more value. And we're actually going to do next week. We're going to have part 2 of this interview, where we're going to help our owners deal with staff behavior issues. So we're going to deal with staff brain next week. So look forward to coming back. And we will talk with Prerna next week on staff behavior issues. And we want to thank you so much for coming on the Child Care Genius podcast.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that was some great content there.
Yes, it was. We learned a lot.
Yeah, she's really good. And we're so glad to have her on our team. She actually works and helps coach our Child Care Genius University students in our coaching program on behavior issues and staff behavior issues, which are a huge problem for a lot of people. Now, if you're a center owner and you need help in your childcare business, and we'd like a free coaching call with me to help you in any area of your biggest business that you're struggling in, visit our website at childcaregenius.com. And under the coaching tab, select a free coaching call button and a guarantee to come away with 2 or 3 items that you could take on right away and help where you might be struggling. And with that, we're going to conclude episode 46 of the Childcare Genius podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your busy life to spend a little bit of time with Carol and me.
And just a reminder to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a future episode of the Childcare Genius podcast. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Childcare Genius podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. Don't forget to visit our website at childcaregenius.com to see a list of services we offer to help grow your childcare business. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Childcare Genius community.